I'm ready.
Okay, if you want to do the little blurb.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Gretchen Roberts. I'm CEO of Red Bike Advisors. We are a tax, accounting, and advisory firm based in Wilmington, North Carolina, and serving clients all over the US. We particularly love to work with doctors, dentists, therapists, chiropractors, anybody in the medical field. I think all of you have very special needs, not special needs, but you have a particular set of circumstances that you're working against, and we're really into helping you through those. I'm really happy to be on the Practice of Therapy podcast.
Perfect.
You want me to redo
Good.
that?
No, it's fine. She'll
Okay.
take she'll edit it and everything. It's funny. You said you're in Wilmington. My niece is at UNCW.
Oh,
So
nice. Yeah, great
yeah,
college.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is. Yeah. So good. Okay. Well, hello everyone, and welcome again to the podcast. And I'm really happy for you to get to know today Gretchen Roberts from Red Bike Strategies. And Gretchen, happy to have you with us.
Thank you. It's really great to be here, Gordon.
Yes, yes. And so today we're going to be talking about finances, which is always a big topic here on this particular podcast, the importance of knowing your numbers. But particularly with us heading into tax season, that's just something that is probably on a lot of people's minds. But Gretchen, as I start with everyone, tell folks a little more about yourself and how you've landed where you've landed.
All right. Thanks, Gordon. So I'm Gretchen Roberts, CEO of Red Bike Advisors. We were previously Adam Shea CPA. We've been in practice since, I think, 2009, end of 2009. And our big focus is serving clients in tax advisory, accounting and bookkeeping, business advisory. So I would think of this as business financial advisory. And then we also have a specialized department for what we call financial medic, which is appropriate for this audience a little bit. And that's our tax resolution and our fraud and forensic department. So if you get into tax trouble, or on the fraud and forensic side, we have a lot of people who come in. They're in a divorce dispute or a business dispute, or an employee has stolen from them, and so our forensic accountants help them deal with that nightmare and get it cleaned up so they can move on.
Hmm. Well, good. Well, good. Well, I know, again, like I've said, a theme people hear from me all the time is, the importance of knowing your numbers and really just making those sound financial decisions with particularly running a small business, running a practice, and knowing all the different nuances of that, from what you pay people to all the different things. But I know one of the things that you had mentioned before we started recording is just being able to look at your numbers in terms of a managerial tool. So you want to say more about that?
Yeah, this is one of my favorite topics. And so I'm just going to climb right on my soapbox and talk about it if that's okay.
Mhm. Sure.
um, yeah, so, you know, I think a lot of practice owners are almost accidental business owners. And I'm sure you've talked about this as well. You're probably good at the thing you do, so in this case therapy, and then you decide you want to go out on your own, and all of a sudden you're doing HR and IT and operations, and you're managing people, and you're doing payroll, and you're doing all this stuff. And that's not really how you were trained or your area of expertise. And we find that a lot of our clients, especially in the medical dental field, do not we're not trained on accounting. And by the way, that's okay. I mean, I always say that I'm a business owner like you, and I don't do my own books either. I don't want to do my
Hmm.
books. I want somebody else to do them. But I do think that as a business owner, and by the way, accounting practices are called practices as well, but I'm in a mastermind, and the leader of our mastermind finds us if we call it a practice. He wants
Hmm.
us to call it a business. And the goal is it's a mindset thing. I'm not a practice owner, I'm a business owner.
Hmm.
And so, whether you're saying practice or business, it's the same thing. That I think that the person who owns the practice or the business is not necessarily responsible for the day-to-day bill pay and invoicing and doing the accounting and bookkeeping. but they absolutely are responsible for the financial health of their business. And that really is always going to fall on you. It's not going to fall on an external resource. The problem is most practice owners don't really understand how to read their financial reports. They don't know what they're saying. And so, I feel like this is why I said soapboxes. I feel like it's
Hmm.
my goal in life to get them to get practice owners to understand how to read those reports and understand that the finances actually tell a story of your operations and the overall health of your business. And if you can crack that, then you actually know what actions you need to take next to improve the business.
Right, right. Yeah. So when you think about looking at a profit and loss statement and the story it tells, what are the things you generally look at first? I mean, most of us can look at, okay, we're bringing this much money in, which is your income, and then your expenses. And I think it's always good if your income is larger than your expenses.
Always.
Yeah, yeah. So what are the things that you generally look for when you're looking at a P&L?
So I like to think of it as let's go to the 10,000 foot view to start because I think that's always the place to start. So it's easy to get caught in little line items, right? So maybe you have an expense account for insurance or something like that. But what we really want to look at is the big buckets. Um, these are percentages that should roll up to 100% revenue, right? So if your revenue is 100%, how much should you be spending on cost of goods or cost of service? What percentage as a bucket? And then what percentage on running the practice or operational expenses? What percentage should you be spending on sales and marketing? Those are the big buckets. And then what percentage should your target profit be? Again, all those four buckets should add up to 100%. And this is a little
Mhm.
twist on profit first, but what we really want to look at is, okay, what should the net profit margin be? And then we need to adjust the other categories to meet and beat that benchmark. So,
Mhm. Mhm.
in this industry, and you can do research on this and it varies, but like if you're a solo practice, you're going to do way better on net margin because you just have very few expenses. So it might be like 30 to 40%. Once you start growing and you've got some clinicians under you, it is going to drop. But hopefully you have a bigger piece of a smaller pie, or is it a smaller piece of a bigger pie, right?
Yeah, yeah, right,
So
right.
there it might be like 15 to 20. But if let's say you're running a small practice, you've got a couple clinicians and your profit's under 10%, that's a big red flag. And that tells us, hey, we
Mm.
need to look at your sales and marketing expense. We need to look at your operational expense, like, your building, your software, all the things that it takes just to run the business. And we need
Mhm.
to look at your cost of goods or cost of service and your employee costs to see, are these in line with the industry? Where is it way too high as a percentage? And then that's where we dig in to say, okay, we need to reduce this because the profit is not enough.
Right, right. Yeah, and so when you think about the places where I guess I like to think of it as like a leaky bucket, what do you find are the places where people can cut their expenses the easiest?
Well, I'll start with impact because
Hmm.
it's easy to cut out your Starbucks or whatever, but let's go to impact. So probably the biggest line item if you have employees is your salary expense. And it depends on how the practice is run, but I will say that I've seen quite a few of them where they're paying a percentage to basically contractors, and the percentage is way too high, and they haven't really
Hmm.
thought it through. So the percentage is super high, and then they still have the office and admin and the sales and marketing expenses on top of that. And when you add that up, you're not making a profit, or you're making very little. And so let's say the
Hmm.
profit goes down to 10. So
Hmm.
what needs to be reduced? Do you need to reduce your building expense? Do you need to reduce what is it? Or do you need to renegotiate your contracts with your biggest expense, which is your team members?
Right, right. Yeah, especially for the um, therapy therapy practices, or as you pointed out, therapy businesses. Um, we we tend to, yeah, particularly if you've got a group practice, your employee cost is going to always be your largest cost because there's not a
Yes.
lot of equipment that we use and that sort of thing. And, other than, an office space, that kind of thing, there's just not a lot of overhead really.
Yeah, exactly. And so and then it's two different questions. If you're paying them a percentage, you have to figure in your other costs, and then you have to figure out what your net profit is and what it should be. And maybe that
Right.
needs to be renegotiated. If it's on salary, then it's a different question. Maybe it's a utilization question. Are they being utilized if they're on salary? Do they have enough bookings? That
Hmm.
becomes a sales and marketing problem. We need to bring in new
Right.
clients so that they are properly utilized so that we can realize our margins correctly.
Right. Right. I think another area too that I know um, can be kind of a, I guess maybe sticking point for people or whatever is just thinking about how they, well, like you mentioned, pay their people, and they do it just kind of arbitrarily, rather than really basing it on what's realistic and what's sustainable.
And this is always a hard conversation because you're hearing as you're because the labor market has been tight for a little bit, and so you go, well, I've got to bring this person in and they're asking for this much, and you don't even know if you can afford that, but what else are you going to do? You have to bring them in.
Hmm.
And so again, this is how the financials tell the story though. So if you're bringing somebody in and you go, okay, I need them to be at a healthy utilization rate of, let's say, 70 to 75%. And
Hmm.
now the next question is, how do I bring those clients in so they are properly utilized and we are realizing the revenue that will allow me to pay them a nice salary, but also allow me to have a nice profit because you're the practice owner, the business owner, and you're taking on all the risk and you deserve the reward of that, not a pittance at the end.
Uh-huh. Right, right. And I think that's one area that a lot of people have difficulty with is just I like to refer to it as their money mindset. Most of us in the therapy world are genuinely nice people, and we're empathetic and we want to be generous and that sort
Yes.
of thing. But yeah, in the end, if you're not making a profit, you're not going to be able to keep the doors open.
100%. And I mean, I quote this stat all the time, but 83% of businesses fail because they have cash flow problems. They run out of
Hmm.
cash. And it's not that they don't and going back to what you said, I mean, therapists are genuinely nice people. They want to serve people and
Hmm.
they have a tendency to bend over backwards to do that. And that's where it goes from being a practice owner to being a business owner. Because if you think of yourself from a mindset perspective of being a business owner, you think about it a little differently. You can still
Hmm.
be really kind to your team. You can still create value for your clients and for your team, but you also hold them to standards that you need to hold them to as a business owner. Because if you think about it this way, it is your job as a business owner to run a sustainable, healthy business that can continue the employment of your team. And so if you're
Right.
overreaching on the team and those numbers and you go out of business, they're out of a job. So that's not good for you and it's not good for them.
Right, right. Yeah. Yeah, and that's such an important piece is that you've got to and I think it helps being able to communicate with your people just the fact that okay, we are running a business, and yeah, if you might be able to get paid more somewhere else or by being out on your own, but you're also assuming a higher risk by doing that.
Yeah. Um, you know, the owner should know better than anybody else what it really takes to run a practice.
Right. Oh
So
yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean, and that's not to say team members won't occasionally go out and do that, but a lot of them are employees for a reason. They don't want the headache and the stress and the hassle.
Mm-hmm.
I always think of, being a business owner, if you're an employee, you have these little roller coaster ups and downs, but if you're a business owner, they're like this,
Right,
they're much
right,
higher and much lower. And not everybody has the personality to take that on.
right, right. Yeah, I had a good friend of mine who's been on this podcast several times, Dr. David Hall, and he said being in private practice a lot of times takes a lot of intestinal fortitude, is how we put it, just to be able to kind of manage those ups and downs that you can go through. And that might be a good segue about just you want to say something, Gretchen, about just being able to be prepared for those ups and downs or low periods and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So let's go back to cash flow. Cash is king. Profit is queen, I think. But
Hmm.
again, the sustainability of your business depends on you being able to pay your payroll and pay your bills. And the way you do that is you have the appropriate amount of revenue coming in. You're thinking ahead of it, but really it comes down to cash reserves. And these are super general rules of thumb, but um, I personally think that you should have at least 1 month expenses in your checking account. And I think you should have a plan or an actual up to 3 to 6 months in an interest bearing savings account for those rainy days.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
you should also, if you can get it, have a line of credit. And a line of credit should not be for operational use. So, and what I mean by that is if you're funding payroll through your line of credit, you're doing it wrong. And you've got to get
Right.
out of that because that's like funding your living expenses or like paying your mortgage on your credit card or something. It's just not
Hmm.
sustainable. A line of
Right.
credit should be for emergencies like your HVAC breaks or your your biggest client leaves and leaves a huge hole and you literally can't pay that month, but you have a plan to get that revenue back.
Right. Right.
Emergencies. So it's good to have a line of credit sitting there because that helps you not wake up at 3 a.m. and wonder if you're going to make payroll, but it shouldn't be
Hmm.
used for operations. Um,
Right.
yeah. So, 1 month's expenses in your checking account, 3 to 6 months in an interest bearing account. Most people don't have that. And one of the things we do is we work with you to say, okay, what do you really need? And then let's come up with a plan to get you there. Because
Hmm.
when you have that, you can sleep at night and you can make a lot
Right.
more empowering decisions. You can take a few risks. You can do a lot of like, and by risks, I mean things like um, maybe there's somebody on your team who's just not a good cultural fit, and you're worried they're gonna, the rest of the team is gonna revolt, and so maybe you have to
Hmm.
get rid of that person, but then you have a client problem, or maybe you have some clients that you really that are harmful to your team and the practice overall, and they're not really what you want to do or who you want to stand for. And it's always scary to go, I'm going to fire a client. Where's that?
Hmm.
How do I replace that revenue? But if you have cash in the bank, you can make decisions like that and not, again, lie awake at 3 a.m.
Right. Yeah. Fretting about all those things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, Gretchen, just to pivot a little bit, I know as this episode will be coming out, we'll be in the middle of tax season. And I know, as you and I were talking about before we started recording, that's everybody's tax situation is different. And so there's probably no real universal rules around taxes. But what, um, what would be some things that people need to keep in mind, at least things that you've seen where they've made mistakes along the way?
I think one of the biggest mistakes business owners make is thinking that tax season is a once a year event.
Hmm.
And it's like, okay, my CPA reached out. Now I have to gather my documents. And if they're not doing my books, I have to give them my financials. And then they're going to tell me what I owe. And that's always a nasty surprise, right?
Right.
So I really believe in, so we aren't official profit first collaborators, but one of the great takeaways from Profit First is saving for taxes all year, so there's no
Hmm.
surprise at the end.
Right.
Another
Right.
thing we do is we'll do a tax projection toward the end of the year when we have a better idea of what the net income will be. So if you think about now, we're in tax season, right? So let's say we do a business return and the personal return for the owner and we know what their tax liability is for the previous year, and then we spit out vouchers for the next year. Those vouchers are based on their income from the previous year. Now, if
Hmm.
if you're growing rapidly, or unfortunately, if you're shrinking, or something happens in the business, your tax liability is going to be different. And so
Right.
at the end of the year, we like to look again at the P&L and L and go, okay, where are you really at this year? How do we need to true this up? So so you don't have a big surprise at the end of the year and a bunch of penalties for underpayment.
Right. Right. I know one thing that I've always heard is the importance of having your tax situation. So at the end of the year, when it's tax time, is that you don't owe anything, and also you don't get anything back, and that you want to just kind of be at a net zero for your taxes.
That is
How
definitely ideal.
Yeah, and I've experienced it this way as well in my own practices. Is that um, you you get to the end of the year and you realize, oh, I've done better than I thought I had, and
Yeah.
so then you end up having a larger tax bill than other. Or worst case scenario is people not paying their estimated taxes throughout the year, and that's just that can get people in just a really big trouble. Um,
I will say about that though. So going back to what you said about you want to be at net zero for sure. But I actually just got off a call with a client and I was telling them you're never going to be perfect on this tax thing because things are changing all the time and you can pay your
mhm.
estimates and then pay them later, but you're either going to be over or under. I mean, it's almost impossible to be at zero. What you
Hmm.
don't want is to be so far over that you've lent the government money for an entire year when you could have been using that cash flow, and you don't want to be
Hmm.
so under that you have this big tax bill with interest and penalties. And so if you get close to zero, that's the goal. I will
Hmm.
say, and this was more true when the interest rates were lower. So a couple years ago, before the interest rates really went up, we had a lot of clients who would not pay their quarterly estimated taxes because the penalties were low enough that, the interest penalties that they were like, this is better than a bank. I'm just going to keep this cash and reinvest it, and then I'll just pay the penalty at the end of the year. But that's becoming less common because the interest rates have gone up. And so it's no longer advantageous to let the government fine you with
Hmm.
penalties and interest fees.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and I like your reference to profit first. I'm a big fan of that. In fact, for folks that maybe are newer to the podcast, if you'll go back to some of the early episodes, I had the privilege of interviewing Mike McAllowitz for
Oh,
a
nice.
couple of episodes. So, but it's a great way, I think, for people to get their head around the financial side um, in terms of thinking of percentages and just really looking at your finances through that lens. Because I know one of the things that's always hard to do is if you're thinking of making a budget for your practice, percentages just makes it easier. And I
Yeah.
think being able to also just like the term implies is you take your profit off the top, and then everything else underneath just kind of falls in line with that. Hopefully,
Will say it's a little bit easier said than done. I mean, and you know
yes.
this because you're also a practice owner. So if you go, okay, I'm at 10% and I need to get it at least to 20 this year, and then you have to look at your expenses and go, where do I cut? Well, I can't cut sales and marketing or we can't grow. I can't cut my team's salary. They exist and they're here and they're not going to take a pay cut. And then you have a couple operational things you can cut maybe, and that's not really going to do it. So you really need to go, oh, actually I need to spend more to invest in sales and marketing so that I can get that profit up. But I mean, so yes, that is the goal.
Hmm.
But when you're running a live business, I always like to think of it as building the plane while you're flying it.
Yeah.
And so there you are, you're flying the plane. It's in motion. Your business is running, but you're also constantly trying to rebuild it. And so sometimes it takes time, but if you I think it starts with benchmarking, right? So you go, where am I compared to the industry standard? And the goal is not
Hmm.
to get to the industry benchmark, it's to beat it. So,
Yeah.
first you meet it and then you beat it. And that's a process. It takes time.
Right, right. From what you have experienced so far, Gretchen, what's a good, this is kind of getting off on a tangent here, but what's a good profit margin percentage for most practices, would you say?
Yeah, so again, you can do some research online and it's going to vary, but typically if you're a solo practice owner, it's a lot higher. But
Hmm.
again, like it's a lot higher, but it's a smaller amount of revenue. So that would be like 30 to 40% is pretty typical for a solo practitioner. Once you start adding team members, it's going to go to typically 15 to 20. There's
Hmm.
just more overhead, more expenses. You've got payroll. But again, the goal there is you're expanding your revenue. And so even though the percentage is smaller, you should, after the initial rough period where you're investing but not reaping all the benefits yet, um, once you get over that hump, you should be getting, even though it's a smaller percentage, a bigger total amount of net profit.
Right, right. Yeah. Well, I know there are a lot of different things we can talk about, Gretchen, around this topic, but I've got to be respectful of your time and just and that sort of thing. But what are some maybe some kind of closing thoughts you would say of just about finances and being prudent and with all of this?
Yeah. So I think again, I'm going to go back to something I said in the beginning, which is that you can outsource your accounting, payroll, like all of those back office functions, but you as a practice owner, you do have the responsibility for the financial fitness of your own business. That falls on you. And so even though it's probably not something you learned in school and maybe you haven't taken the time to learn on the fly, but it is essential that you learn how to read your financial reports, understand the story they're telling you, and make the operational changes that you can see in them. So,
Hmm.
I think that's it. And, we work with a lot of business owners and practice owners who need some help in this area because they're not quite sure what they're looking at or what to do. And that's a lot of fun for me, doing that kind of coaching, but
Hmm.
you can do it yourself. I mean, there's so many resources online, it's really just about saying, I am committing to this year and I'm going to educate myself and I'm going to start doing these things because they will make a huge impact on
Hmm.
the financial health of your practice.
Right, right. Yeah. And I've learned a lot, as I tell people a lot of times, I've learned a lot the hard way with my own practice. And I think one of the big learning things that mistakes I made early on when I started my group practice is not really understanding the importance of not just doing a ad hoc or at random kind of percentage of what you pay your people because
Yes.
typically if you're I was trying to be generous but I was overpaying, and what I found really quickly is going back to the cash flow. I was having to work harder with the clients I saw in order to pay people in my business, whereas it should have been quite the opposite of that, in that I should have been profiting on what they were making. And so
And I
I
think,
made that
that's
adjustment.
yeah, I mean, I think every business owner does that in the beginning, right?
Hmm.
That's your pattern. And then you realize I am on the road to burnout. And that's
Hmm.
not why I started this thing. I started
All
it for
right.
time freedom and financial freedom, not for burnout.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and and that goes back to, with the percentages, that's definitely a rookie mistake when you're starting and you want to be generous because therapists are inherently generous and they want to help people. That's what you do. So it
Hmm.
makes sense, but eventually you have to pull back and go, does this make financial sense?
Right. Right. And if you're not making a profit, you can't stay open, and that helps no one.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Gretchen, so glad you joined us. Tell folks how they can get in touch with you and learn more about your Red Bike Advisors and all of that.
Yeah, so we are at redbikeadvisors.com. Like I said, we do tax, financial, accounting and bookkeeping, and then the financial medic side of the business. I hope nobody who's listening is in any kind of financial trouble or tax trouble. Yeah, redbikeadvisors.com. We have a free strategy session forum. So that's where we look at, we'll take a look at your business, your pain points, kind of where you're at, and just see if there's any way we can help you.
Awesome. Awesome. And we'll have links here in the show notes and the show summary for people to find that easily. And I guess one other quick question, and this is a big switch. I love the idea of the red bike. So tell us the story behind that.
Um, so the how the sausage is made story is I had a different name picked out. We had to rebrand because my name is not Adam Shea and I acquired his practice in
Uh-huh.
2023. Um, and I had a different name and my husband hated it. And then he said, well, what about Red Bike Advisors? I have this red bike behind me. It's been on my wall for a long time. And I love bike riding. I always have. And I said, oh no, the domain won't be available. The trademark, nothing. Social won't be available. It was all available.
Mhm. That's
But
great.
I will say, from a branding perspective, the way we think of it is this: like our tagline is break away from the pack. And, our goal is for the business owners we work with that you're not just in this big pack of people like in the middle. And that refers to your financial KPIs, how you run your business, everything. We want you to break away from the pack, and that's a biking term where somebody pulls out in front. And, the other thing about bicycling, I don't know if you're a biker, but
Mhm.
especially if you're going up and down hills, there's headwinds, there's tailwinds, you have to pedal furiously, then you can coast for a little bit. And, at the end is victory, but you're really on it for the ride, not for the end. And I think business is the same way. You're not there to get
Mhm.
to a destination, you're there for the journey. And you might as well have an amazing time with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that story. That's great. That's great. So, well, Gretchen, thanks again for being on the podcast. And again, folks, if you'll check out the links in the show notes and the show summary and get in touch with Gretchen.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Gordon, for having me. I appreciate it.
Glad you were here.